along. So welcome everyone to virtual Vic. My name's Louise Yearwood. I'm the Executive Director of Alumni Affairs and Advancement, and it's my pleasure to host today's event. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Grace and what she's been doing in a second, but we'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. So while we cannot be on campus, I would like to acknowledge the sacred land on which Victoria University operates and to pay respect to those who came before us. This land is a territory of the Huron, Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live in the community on this territory. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to strive to make right with all our relations. So thank you again for joining us, and a couple of logistics. If you could stay muted, and I can see you all are muted, so that's great. And then when we get to the Q&A at the end, you can certainly unmute and ask your question, or if you're more comfortable posting it in the chat, we will be monitoring the chat. And also we're recording this session for later. So on to the business at hand. This is the first in the series of 3 sessions that we're doing that we're calling our grad school for young alumni. This is the first of 3. The other 2, which are upcoming, include a session with Eric Brock, Vic 97, and Ida Slavado, who's Vic 95, and they're talking on why you should make bad decisions, kind of an intriguing title, and founded in behavioral economics. So that's coming up. And then we end with Liz Parker, who has her own PR firm, and she's talking about building your personal brand. So I'm so pleased you're with us for this one, and I hope that you can join us for our 2 upcoming as well. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Grace McDonald, who is Vic 1T4. She completed her law degree, as we heard a minute ago, at Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops, where she received the Law Foundation of BC Entrance Scholarship, Thompson Rivers University Advocates Award, and the Law Foundation of BC Public Interest Scholarship. She was an executive on the Women in Law Society, president of the Outlaws, and a member of the Equity Committee. And upon graduation from law school, a scholarship was announced in her name for future students who exemplify academic achievement and leadership. What a wonderful honor. Grace completed her BA in philosophy at Vic. She was the recipient of the Gordon Cressy Leadership Award and was voted as the member of the graduating class who contributed the most to the school and was considered to best represent the class at convocation. So another wonderful honor. So Grace, we're delighted to have you with us today talking on EDI in the workplace. Again, thank you for being here, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Louise, for that extremely generous and long introduction. Grace would have been just fine, but I appreciate that so much. And I'll just start off and say my pronouns are she and her. Given we're all virtually in a variety of different places, I would just like to give my own land acknowledgement today that I live, work, reside, and play on the unceded and stolen territories of the Coast Salish people, which includes the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I would like to encourage all of you, if you're located on a different land than what I've said or Louise has said, feel free to do your own land acknowledgement in the chat today. The chat is a safe space today to put any of your thoughts, comments, and questions, as well as I want to leave time at the end for a conversation. I like to say a conversation or a discussion and questions as well. I am so happy to be here today. I wish that I was physically there. I wish we were all physically there. Vic holds a tremendous place in my heart. I came out when I was a Vic student, and was supported by Victoria College, which holds a lot of happy memories to me. So it's a very big foundational piece to me, which is why I'm extremely happy to be here, and also very intrigued about the next talk about making bad decisions, because I think that going to Vic was a very great decision for me, and was vital in kind of basically building who I am today. So as kind of mentioned, this is a bit of a talk on equity, diversity, and inclusion. I tried to really focus on what the title is, which talks about within in the community and also at work. So I want to try to touch on all of those areas. Basically, when I was at Vic, I want to talk a little bit about my story as well. I wasn't very involved in my first year, I want to say, as well as this has kind of been a trend that I've followed in my career. I always like to kind of sit back when I enter a new space, a new environment, a new community, a new institution, and kind of get the lay of the land and just understand how things work. So typically my first year in a new place, I don't tend to be tremendously involved. It's just my kind of way of sussing out the gaps, and I'm going to talk about that quite a bit today in trying to find where gaps are either within your community or within work. So I got really involved in Vic in second, third, and fourth years. I had the pleasure of working very closely with former President Gooch on a number of mentorship projects that were very important to me. And it was important that I felt like the students were getting the mentorship and support needed in order to get further ahead in their careers, because as we know at U of T, it's a very large school. Vic is a very large college. It's hard to just not feel like you're necessarily your student ID, which I still remember off the top of my head. I think it's like tattooed on me. So I wanted more student involvement, more involvement from the professors, and so I had the tremendous privilege of working with former President Gooch on that, as well as being a part for Ideas for the World at Vic. I was a big supporter and a big volunteer there, which was one of the best experiences of Vic, and I think a lot of people say that who are involved as well. So I left Vic and I took a year off, which I'd never imagined doing ever, because I'm a bit too much of an overachiever and keener. So I took a year off and I worked in Toronto, still very heavily tied to Vic. And I studied for the LSAT. I took the LSAT. I applied to every law school in Canada and only got into TRU Law, which I just like to tell people, because I think it's important you understand my story is not one of just straight A's across the board, is that I was very grateful to receive an opportunity at Vic, and I've been very grateful to receive an opportunity at TRU. So I think that's why I still maintain such a strong connection. And I think gratitude is a huge part of EDI work as well. So once again, first year at TRU, I didn't really do anything. I was mostly struck by the intensity of law school, which is very intense. And then at the end of my first year, I got involved with a case that was basically a private evangelical Christian school wanted to create a law school, which would involve a covenant and asking students to sign a contract, basically saying that they couldn't be gay, they couldn't be trans, they couldn't have an abortion, couldn't drink, a bunch of other unfortunate things. So I got involved in that case because the student association, the LGBTQ2SI+ student association, was an intervener in the Supreme Court of British Columbia case. And I became president of the student group that was the intervener. So basically I inherited this case as a law student. And as the years went on and the case traveled up to the Court of Appeal, my role got bigger and I actually became the affiant. So it was my evidence given on behalf of all LGBTQ2SI+ law students in British Columbia to the court, basically saying that if this school got a law school that was able to exclude gay people, then that would be discriminatory and and against the basic fundamental principles allowed for and protected in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So that kind of was a huge Kickstarter for me. The case got brought to the Supreme Court of Canada, and prior to that point, I got a call from the federal government asking me to consult on the apology to the LGBTQ2SI+ community based off of my experiences of being a law student in rural British Columbia. And just to tie kind of the theme again in figuring out gaps, I've always felt like Vancouver and Toronto are very well-resourced big cities. I will say very well-resourced. Well, we all know that, like, of course, more can be done. So I don't mean to diminish that, but I think that big cities are very well-resourced. So having the opportunity to be in Kamloops, which is, for you, those of you who don't know, about 4 hours north of here, of Vancouver. So to just understand that there was no legal clinic in rural British Columbia. They're all in Victoria and Vancouver. And so to think about how that was such a disadvantage, not only to people generally, but also to any historically disadvantaged community, let alone the fact that the law profession is a historically white, cis, male-dominated profession as well. So I provided some insights to the federal government for the apology, and how the settlement funds should be distributed, which ended up getting me an invitation to the apology, which was the day before the Supreme Court of Canada hearing. And then Vic so nicely asked me to fly to Toronto 2 days before that and give a talk at a Vic conference, which was wonderful because I got to see some Vic friends and feel inspired and fired up before I headed to Ottawa. So after Ottawa, the Supreme Court of Canada, we won 6 months later, which was wonderful. And that really solidified so much for me. Basically, I had yet to become a lawyer, and I felt like I could retire and be happy having helped with that case. But as my lawyer dad said, no, you have to, you know, do some more things. That's great, but, you know, let's become a lawyer. So that kind of led me to get a job at the biggest firm in British Columbia. And I've been working very hard there ever since. I'm currently, because we're going through student recruit, the only openly gay litigator at my firm. So statistically, that's hard for me to swallow. But I think that really inspired me to do more EDI. I'll use the word EDI as an umbrella term. EDI work, because I think in identifying gaps, it can feel super intimidating to walk into an environment where you already know that there aren't necessarily going to be, you know, certain numbers, diversity numbers represented, or policies where you might feel protected, and not just protected, but also supported, and also like promoted, and also celebrated. And I'm kind of potentially a bit of an outlier in that I like to throw myself into really difficult things. So going into my work and knowing that there wasn't necessarily the same type of supportive frameworks that would be ideal. I wanted to be someone to change that. And in big law, in big accounting, in whatever career profession, there are a lot of gaps still, especially with women, especially with further historically disadvantaged groups. And when I speak through my lived experiences, I speak as a gay woman. That is my lived experience. But I think in kind of starting with the within part is really thrusting yourself into education. And obviously you will all have lived experiences, but we need to broaden our horizons and really understand the perspectives of where everyone is coming from. The strategy that I take with EDI is literally hand-to-hand combat, which many people think is a bit insane because it is a tremendous amount of emotional labor. And emotional labor is like my huge keyword of like, yeah, it's a lot. And I spend a lot of energy and time talking to people one-on-one. But I think especially from a strategic point of view, when you talk to people one-on-one, you get to understand them better, their perspective. It's also a huge connection point. And when I was battling against Trinity Western, I had so many conversations with Trinity Western students. And I'm not the type of person that gets into fiery debates. I did philosophy at Vic, as you heard, so I've seen the debates, but I generally like to sit back and try to understand where people are coming from. So doing that work within involves a lot of one-on-one conversations, a lot of reading books, a lot of asking around, a lot of, I'm thankful the profession I'm in, we have a regulation body who has educational modules. So there's lots of trainings for free that I can do, but not just based off of being a lawyer. I know there's tons of modules out there. There's tons of free trainings online in terms of unconscious bias, LGBTQ2SI+, trans competency, anti-Black racism training. What else is important? Obviously, there's an Indigenous aspect, and I think a huge overhang of what I want to impress upon all of you today is a real trauma-informed framework. I think that I didn't really fully understand how to be impactful with EDI, and not just the EDI of my own lived experiences, but the EDI of lived experiences of others, without that type of trauma-informed approach. And it's very crucial, I think, in any profession that you're in, is that you maintain that type of lens, because this work can be really difficult. And I think as well, we talk a lot about privilege too, because I just always stick my privilege on the desk and say, I have a tremendous amount of privilege. I came from a tremendous amount of privilege. I try to use that as much as possible in order to further EDI as well. But I think in understanding privilege, I think I work with a lot of corporations who want to do this work but have fear. And the thing that I always tell them is, if you have fear, that's privilege. It's in a privileged position. There's so many wonderful corporations, nonprofits out there, institutions, workplaces that want so much to do this work, but they are so afraid to just take the first step because they're so afraid to get it wrong. And my perspective on that, which I understand isn't the perspective of everyone, is that you always just have to take a first step. You always have to take a bit of a leap. And you feel better about taking a leap if you've done the work and if you've done the education. And so I know some people aren't always super keen on just having these EDI committees, but I think it just depends on how inspired people are and how motivated people are. I sit on a number of EDI committees, both for work and for other pursuits. And it just depends on how much people want to do and how much people want to accomplish. So I think that's a really big part of it as well. So doing the work within, I also, whenever I give any type of talk, I also like to give a huge nod to the mental health aspect. I'm someone that suffers from anxiety. I'm someone that's committed to my own growth, that's committed to therapy every single week, because if I can't do this work, that would be a tremendous blow to myself as well as my community. So you need to have the confidence in yourselves, and you need to be okay in order to do any of this type of work, and you need to fill your cup before you try to fill anyone else's. And so I'm always very honest about that, because I think it's very important. People see me, they see you're so extroverted. I'm not. I'm a huge introvert. I'm gonna go to bed at 8 p.m. tonight probably after this. So I think it's really good to note that, because I always appreciate people coming up to me after a talk or emailing me saying I have anxiety too, how can I do this? And I love to be able to say you are going to do this, you absolutely can. So that's a lot about taking care of yourself as well. And just thinking, what do I want to see in the world? And it's just like I've said, thinking about those gaps. What's missing? What's missing in my workplace? What's missing in my community? Is there another community that doesn't have something that my community has and I can maybe help out in some way? It's all about connections. It's all about recognizing those gaps as well. So in kind of turning to community and in the workplace, I have a favorite quote of a philosopher poet. One day I hope to be called like Grace McDonald, philosopher poet, but it's David White. He goes by philosopher poet, and it's a corporation will not maintain its identity if it has a conversation. A corporation will not maintain its identity if it has a conversation. And I think that's true about yourself, as well as communities, as well as workplaces. The more and more information I get on a day-to-day basis, the more and more I understand things better. I see other gaps. And these conversations are so important to be had on a first and foremost basis. So I want you all to be thinking about that, and I hope you like that quote as much as I do, because I think it's absolutely right in that we can't be stuck in the way that things used to be. And when you try to push the dial forward, it's not because you are wanting to disrespect the way that things have been. It's not because you're wanting to ruffle feathers. It's because, you know, times are changing. A lot of these things need to gain traction, and we need to see a more diverse community, a more diverse workplace. And these things are crucial, especially given COVID, and we know the tremendous effect that it's had on women as well. So community, for me, it plays a huge intersectionality piece, which I think is important to kind of understand and educate ourselves on as well. And I always try to just immerse myself in the community. Same with being at Vic. You're immersed in the community. When I lived in Kamloops for 3 years for law school, I was immersed in the law school community, and I was immersed in the Kamloops community itself. And then in work, I immerse myself in the community at work. I live and breathe it. I have these important conversations with people, and figuring these things out, spending the year-ish that I spend just understanding, it always is like thinking of the framework as well, the institutional framework. I'm a bit of like a policy geek and nerd, and I will read like any policy and think, you know, what's missing? Is there any nod to like, you know, LGBTQ2SI plus affinity groups, or is there space for people to gather and to come together and to make a community? Who is this policy protecting? Who writes these policies? Who publishes these policies? I think understanding key players is a huge part of it. As well, I think finding a champion, your champion. I have existed on the backs and shoulders of many incredible people, many of which being people at Vic like Kelly Castle, like Paul Gooch. There were people in law school that were Gooch and Kelly Castle for me, as well as in the workplace. My boss is an incredibly brilliant female trailblazer who supports me and says, you want to make an equity, diversity, inclusion committee? Okay, well, you're going to need a partner, so put my name down. It's those types of things, but it's only, that would have only happened, that wouldn't have happened unless I had had those conversations with her being like, hey, I'm getting like misgendered a lot in court. And I know that people in the workplace don't misgender me, and I feel super comfortable in the workplace, and my workplace is so supportive. But like, I want to change that because I'm sick and tired of being misgendered. And I'm really grateful that you correct people, but like, can I like help? Can we do something? It wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had those types of conversations, or me just saying, yeah, I was a part of Trinity Western. I'd really like to do some of that work here. It is putting yourself out there for sure. But the things that have happened because I've been open about my own experiences that have then led to us opening the door for many LGBTQ candidates to get hired at my workplace. I don't know, that honestly makes me emotional because I think it's fantastic. And I try so hard to think about the people that come after me. I'm grateful to the people who came before me who opened the door for me to do these things, but it's really the people that come after me that I think about. Last week, my workplace just announced its policy of including your pronouns at the end of your signature block. So the biggest firm in the province is making a standard and a statement like that. And I got to write the policy. Well, I wrote the policy and said, hey, I wrote this policy in my spare time. How about it? And I had already done the work. So they were like, well, okay. And then I wrote the resource guide for using pronouns. And I think a year ago, I didn't have the same type of understanding of pronouns because I use she, her pronouns. I'm cisgender. My experience is limited to being misgendered as a cisgender androgynous gay person. So that's my subset, right? But I needed to further understand they, them pronouns. Also in French, which is a whole nother ballpark. So it kind of ties in with getting that educational piece as well. So yeah, having those, identifying those gaps, those obstacles, understanding the key players and leaning on those people. There's been lots of times where clients want to see more diverse council being represented. So if you have a workplace, if you have an institution that you work for, that that your clients or the people that you are talking to on an external basis want to see more diversity, that's a huge opening, I think. And like I said, some things don't happen because people don't feel like they have the education. And I will say typically in these, historically, it has been the white male cisgender people who have these roles who are like, I don't have any experience in this, like I don't know what to do. So sometimes in terms of you're offering help, you're offering like, yeah, so I maybe like I have this lived experience, but I also know someone who might be able to help consult with us on figuring out a path forward. So it is hugely about, as I've mentioned, the kind of connective piece as well. So figuring out the key players, not only in your workplace, but in your community. I sit on the board of Kamloops Pride in Kamloops, which is like obviously virtually. I'm in Vancouver, but in Kamloops as well. And I sit, I'm an executive member of the Canadian Bar Association, British Columbia branch of the Sexual Orientation and Gender Inclusion Committee. So I take a variety of different roles, both in the city of Kamloops, in the province of BC under the SOGIC committee, which is a legal community committee, as well as I'm the project supervisor, lawyer supervisor for TRU Law's LGBTQ pro bono student projects. So I thought that there should be a trans guide for knowing your rights, kind of like, you know, if you're arrested, how to find a medical practitioner who can treat you, like I said, any interaction with the police, housing rights as well. So I'm the project supervisor for that. So it's all about trying to like move the community forward in a variety of different ways. If you all work, if you have jobs, your jobs are likely regulated by some governing body, or like as U of T, there's institutional, there's a board, there's a lot of institutional layers at U of T. So I always try to figure out, you know, who's involved in those things, where do they get their funding, where can you get funding, what might they be interested in, can you attend any of their meetings, do they have some type of description on their website of any EDI efforts that they do. So a lot of this is kind of like creeping on the low of just understanding, you know, the genetic makeup, I'll say, of the community, of whoever. I will even think about the political spin too. We all have, I guess it's MPPs in Ontario, right? You can just nod. Yeah, okay, we have MLAs here, but like, who's your MPP? Who's your city councillor? Are there members of your historically disadvantaged community who are a politician, even if they're not an MPP or representative in your community? Write to those people. I know of a lot of people who they just feel like it's hard to make the first step of like, why would I email this person? They probably get hundreds of emails. I would just encourage you to never take that step, because for sure someone might not respond, but then you can just go to the next person and you can always just say, you know what, I didn't hear from this person, so I'm hoping you'll help me. And just ways you can kind of push people forward and just say, yeah, you might not be able to help me, but do you know someone who might? Do you know someone that is interested in something that I'm interested in? Can you think of anyone if they say like, oh, I don't know anyone, that's great. Thank you so much for your time. If you ever think of anyone who might be willing to talk to me or share certain things, let me know. You will be amazed at like the fact that you will likely get an email 2 months later from that person, just making that connection. But that's not going to happen unless you kind of make the effort and put yourself in there, which goes back to my, yes, tremendous amount of emotional labor. So the political side is a huge part as well. I try to lean on things as it makes most sense, but that only starts with kind of understanding, you know, the genetic makeup as well. So based off of community, just understanding gaps, who's under-resourced, why are they under-resourced, where does funding typically come from? Is there a community organization that already supports this type of initiative? Can I get involved? The amount of volunteer experiences for me that have turned into paid opportunities is probably 9 out of 10. So sometimes it just like I said, goes to putting in the effort and making yourself available and being keen. Whenever law students contact me, I think it's like the greatest thing in the world when they show how keen they are. And even if I can't, like I've said, assist them in some particular way, I most likely know someone I can introduce them to. So there's no harm in having a very long Rolodex filled with very cool and diverse people. I feel really grateful for the communities that I have, which involve Vic, which involve U of T, which involve TRU, which involve TWU. Despite having one, they're not sore losers, which is very nice, but I have tons of friends there. Or friends, I guess you could say community connectors as well. So I think that community aspect is crucial because we want to exist in a community that we feel comfortable and safe in, and we want people after us to be able to see like, oh, that's Grace. She's a gay litigator at Fasken, and she's 3 years into her career, and she's still there, and she's happy, and she's doing really well, and she gets to work her day job, but also do these really cool LGBTQ2SI+ things on the side. So existence is so important. People just seeing other people in roles and in different roles, and someone has to be in that role, and someone has to kind of take the authority to do so. So that's something I'm always actively thinking about as well. So I guess from a work point of view as well, I've kind of already touched this, but I'll use the buzzword of like fit. I don't understand fit, because I think fit just depends on the current makeup of whoever's there. And I think when we say like you fit in a place, it's just based on our own biases. And so that can be really dangerous because, you know, the person who loves golf is just hiring people who also love golf because they had a great conversation about golf because their favorite golfer was the same golfer. So I think that going down that road can be kind of dangerous. So, you know, whenever I choose a job or an opportunity, it's likely because like I don't fit, or because I am the person that kind of sticks out. That's what actually like draws me to something, is because I'm like, look, I don't think there's someone who has my voice or who has my lived experience or another lived experience that needs to be here, that needs to be at this table. Like I said, it kind of just goes back to recognizing gaps. I come from a very long line of male lawyers and judges, and I watched their careers and I was like, that's great, you all did amazing things, but my path is very different. It's very, very different because I am gay and I'm a woman, and historically in my profession, those aren't things that have necessarily happened, and there aren't many openly gay judges on the bench. And so to kind of think that anyone would be discouraged from like chasing their dreams because they don't necessarily see those people right now is something that like I fight for changing. And there's so many of those equal experiences across the board in lots of different professions. So when it comes to work and it comes to fit, I try to stay away from that because I think we should be throwing ourselves into opportunities where we can simply just make a difference. So that's key to me, as well as kind of a lot of people always say, like, how do you do this? Which is a good question. And I think I've worked very hard, obviously based off of tremendous amount of privilege, but I've worked very hard to be semi-decent at my job, just on a basis point. And you need to love what you do, whatever it is that you do. You need to be passionate about it. You need to have that energy. You need to be, decently successful at it. And I have that part of my house taken care of. And I try really hard, and I keep trying to be a better lawyer and a better student. And I'm constantly learning and constantly wanting to learn. So taking care of your house and trying to be one of the hardest workers in the room is like the first kind of step in order to open up other doors of like, okay, what else do I want to do? I was appointed on my firm, which is an international law firm, or International Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. But that likely would have only happened because I just maintain a certain level of like, getting my hours in, making sure I'm contributing to the business, because I do work for business. And I think understanding the business aspect is really important, and it's really difficult. My current life project, I feel, is trying to convince people and make people understand how EDI is business beneficial. And when I say that, I start off from the point of just like, point one, it's the right thing to do. Point one. So just so we know, that's the base we're working off of. But point two, I want to be persuasive. My job is to be persuasive before a court. So I want to convince people that, yes, this is the right thing to do. But if I don't have you on that point, I'm going to tell you why this is business beneficial. And I think that's a really important key piece of understanding is in the same way that I will draft something to give someone and say, look, I already did this. Like, you can revise it however you like, but I've done the work. I love saying, I have a business plan. I've made a business case. This is why. This is why we should train all of our employees on unconscious bias. I've done a budget. I'm not sure if there's any money, but I've done a business plan. This is really beneficial because if all of our employees have this training and they're able to exist in the world with this training, that makes it clients, want to work with us more because we have that understanding. We have that our clients are diverse. We're working on getting diverse. This is why it's beneficial, and it's just beneficial as a resource builder too, because it's important to be committed to the growth of and the development of your employees. And it's not only helpful in terms of recruitment and trying to recruit people in, but it's also helpful in order to maintain your employees' happiness and keep them, is to commit and invest in their development as lawyers, as teachers, as accountants, as whatever. So that is a huge part of it, is make a strategic plan. I have drafted probably 7 or 8 strategic plans this year for my work, for Kamloops Pride, for companies that ask me to help with their EDI, nonprofits. And there's lots online. It's not like I'm just, things are coming from here. There's tons online that you can look up, that you can kind of read and tailor to. What matters most is, for a strategic plan or a business plan, what's the goal? Making sure that it's realistic, it's within the year. Why is this important? How it can be done, and who's going to be held accountable, and when is the timeline? Always having that. And it can be like, yes, you have your priority, we want to do this in the next year, but I always like to stretch it to like, what does this company look like, or what do I look like 5-10 years down the line? Where do we want to see this go? So having that spin, I think, is really helpful as well. So yeah, business plan, strategic plan, a budget. I think this has been really difficult challenge. Also, something I'm constantly ruminating on is how to do EDI for free. Because I understand that people don't always work with a lot of money, which is why I don't take any payment for doing any talks, or any payment that I do receive, I end up donating it to a charitable cause that I believe in. So if you don't have a budget, like I've said, there's lots of training modules online. There's more being produced. If you do have a budget and you are interested in wanting some trainings, like, please feel free to reach out to me independently, because I have a big Rolodex of incredible counselors, Indigenous trauma-informed based trainers, anti-Black racism, LGBTQ2SI plus competency, this and that. So if you are interested in doing that, please reach out to me. But EDI without a budget, I will say it's a lot of moving the dial forward. And I think I look at it in terms of, there's a policy piece, there's an educational piece, and there's a structural piece. And I think that structure doesn't change without policy, but policy can't happen without education. So that's how I kind of see things. So I work on the education piece, figuring out who I need to educate, and then how the policy can be instituted in order to make the structural change necessary. So just thinking about free EDI things, policies are a huge one. If you can draft a policy, there's lots of templates online. And if you're saying, like, what does the policy say? It's based off of the gaps, whatever gaps you see. Do you want a policy where you can include your pronouns on your signature block or on any type of communication? Do you want a policy about accessible spaces? Do you have a space at your workplace where people can meditate, pray? I also like to think of the one, I guess this is obviously more when we're like in person again, but do you have a space where people can have their like counseling sessions during the workday? Because who does counseling like after 5? Like, I'm impressed, but my counselor does not work after 5. So think about the spaces, think about how you can make people feel more comfortable. A huge one too is who are you highlighting or promoting or celebrating at work? I always encourage companies and nonprofits who want to do more EDI work to say, like, yeah, you have a social media account. I looked at it. It's always cis, straight, white people that you are celebrating. So a lot of that too is, what does your website look like? Do you use stock photos? Who are these stock photos? And then that starts to encroach on the line of tokenism, right? So it really is, don't just ask the diverse people to use their photos and their information. Are you celebrating them? Are you encouraging them? Are you supporting them? Are you asking them what supports they need? So I think that's really important as well. Does your workplace or institution have a place where there are just resources? Doesn't have to be resources that you pay for or provide. There's tons of resources out there. There's tons of amazing organizations who do this work, who provide external help. So literally just a page of resources. That's not a lot of work that you're having to do, but it is something. And that's why I say, like, understand who does the IT, who changes the website. That it just also is also helpful for you to move the dial forward. Like I said, there's lots of modules and trainings online, always focusing on the trauma-informed approaches. Another big one is gender-neutral washrooms. Do you have gender-neutral washrooms? Do you have a landlord that you need to ask about this, as most buildings are run by other people? Assess your workplace or your own charitable partnerships. Who is your workplace giving money to and why? And when was the last time that was looked at? I think, as we know, the past year, there's been a particular climate and openness towards these EDI issues, which is wonderful, because if you live and breathe them every day, you're like, welcome everyone to, you know, the things I've had to be dealing with. But given the current climate, which I'm very happy to see people wanting to include more EDI initiatives, say, like, you know, when was the last time we kind of looked at our partnership where we give to this organization. Like, could be an amazing organization to give to. I'm not trying to discredit that at all. But like, if that was 7 years ago, I think maybe, you know, there's some really great organizations out there that could also use our support. Having those types of conversations, it's not just charitable partnerships, but it's like, who do you hire to do other things? A couple years ago, we looked at like, who our catering company is. And we said, like, there's actually an amazing Indigenous local run catering company that we could hire or we could switch to, because a free meal is a free meal, at least for people attending certain events. I do miss the university, like, free pizza, I will say that. But you know, who are you hiring externally to do things, and can you make those choices more diverse? Can you promote those people? I think that's a huge one. Like I said, if you're already giving money to that person, you don't need to budget to change it. You just need the lens to which you assess these things and kind of figure that out. A huge one is data collection. Do you know the makeup of the people you work for or you work with and who you're hiring? It's a sensitive issue because, you know, no one necessarily likes to hold data, and there's lots of ramifications around holding data. I would encourage you to educate yourself on whatever, you know, whatever legislation, privacy legislation governs whoever you work for or whatever, and understand that, so you can make suggestions of like, look, I've read that, you know, HR can keep this data online in a secure space. I would like us to like send out a survey. When was the last time we asked our employees to self-identify? Always making it known that you don't have to self-identify, but this is just to understand, because I always think you need to know like where you've been before in order to figure out where you want to go. So kind of making that assessment. Nobody likes the word audit in any aspect of life. So I try to not say like, I think we should audit absolutely everything we've done or everything that your company has done. But I think just saying, you know, I want to assess where we've been and how we make these decisions in order to get to a more diverse space as well. So just kind of having your rubric for success. And I think the data point is a huge starting point of just understanding who we are. And that kind of ties me into, you know, is there some type of mission statement? Is there some type of goal? Do you want to become more diverse from the inside out, from top to bottom? Like I said, who's going to be accountable? How are we going to hire people who are diverse, retain people who are diverse? In the legal profession, typically the diverse candidates exit year 5, 6, 7. So I'm not there yet, but you know, how can we keep people years 5, 6, 7? What's happening? Can we do exit interviews to understand so that we don't lose incredible people, incredibly diverse people as well? The other thing I do look at sometimes for external companies that I work with is like, obviously it would be nice if this was immediate, but down the road, hiring a chief equity, diversity, and inclusion officer. There's been a lot of movement on that recently. I think it's a wonderful thing. If money can be allocated to that, I think it's very crucial. Like I said, it's hard to kind of maintain 2 jobs of like my day job and my EDI job. So my firm recently hired an incredible woman to be the chief equity, diversity, inclusion officer. Now they've decided to hire a second person. So does that exist? Can that exist within your workplace as well, or your community? I think there's lots of community leaders who are fighting for these things that I see as chief equity, diversity, and inclusion officers. Introduce yourself to them, have that conversation. I feel like I can promise you that like you won't regret that. You won't regret that, making that type of connection as well. So like I said, I think about it, policy, structure, and education, and you need to have an understanding of the structure in order to make the policy but none of that can happen without the education. And that education so much occurs within, first and foremost, and understanding your community and the needs of your community and listening. And also, I'll say another like buzzword, which I don't like to talk about necessarily, but a lot of this is frozen, I feel like, in my generation with imposter syndrome of people just feeling like, I don't know what to say. I don't think I have anything to say. I really like to tell people that their existence is so important, and I would not have existed without allies in my life who don't feel like they have certain lived experience. But if you don't have the lived experience, you can be a tremendous relief to someone for just being an ally. I've had so many people just be like, I'm so sorry, I don't have like time, I don't have like money, but like, I just want to let you know, like, I love what you're doing. And that means the world to me. That like charges me 3 hours of just energy and pushing me forward. So never underestimate the impact that you can have, even if you don't have some type of lived experience, because your existence is so important. And just making yourself available to someone else, or just trying, even if you fail on a particular thing and you're not able to accomplish a certain EDI goal, you will be recognized by a variety of different people, either within or outside of your organization, for trying to do something. And that won't be seen as being a failure. And I think there's been lots of times where I've done something and it hasn't worked, and then 2 months later someone else has done it and it's worked, but it only worked because I failed the first time. And we understood where we went wrong. And it always seems to revolve around my own lack of preparation or my own lack of education on a particular thing. So that's why I talk about having that basis and just, you know, understanding that imposter syndrome is not doing you any favors whatsoever, and it's not going to help get you to where you want to be and where you could absolutely be. So I guess that's why I kind of started within and I've ended within, and I would just encourage you all to speak up and to speak out and to speak your truth to power, because it's so important, and it's going to be crucial in getting our community, our work, and ourselves to where we want to be as well. So I will cease there. I haven't left that much time for questions, but I'm also going to write my email in the chat, because I always make myself to people to connect, and I love hearing about what people are doing as well. So thank you so much for listening. You didn't really have a choice because you were all muted, but I appreciate it, looking at your faces. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Grace. That was wonderful. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask in the few minutes remaining, or if you prefer to put it in the chat, by all means?
I have one quick question, Grace. First of all, thank you so much for that. That was just remarkable. But my question is there a particular book, or maybe a podcast, or an organization that you would recommend to people who are looking to learn more and grow more within this topic?
Yeah, I think it's hard because I just want to recommend so many, and I think it depends too on like what area of like equity, diversity, and inclusion. I tend to just read a lot of books by strong female women, even if it's just poetry, to kind of like motivate and inspire me. So there's a lot of philosophers. I read a lot of like Martha Nussbaum, just amazing women. I've read like all of everything that Eleanor Roosevelt ever wrote. As well. I think that's a big one that I tell people, because she really inspires people to like go beyond their own personal fears. As well, podcasts, I would say, there's one, like I listen to a lot of trauma-informed podcasts, and also self-compassion. So Kristen Neff, I love the podcast On Being, hosted by Kristen Tippett, amazing. And then there's a really good podcast by Myrna McCallum, and it's called Trauma Informed Lawyering, and it is lawyer based, but it's also like Indigenous trauma aspect. And Myrna is incredible, and she speaks at like universities, not just to lawyers, but to universities, to schools, to basically every type of institution in British Columbia. She's spoken to them. So I really lean heavily on that as well. But yeah, Eleanor Roosevelt, that's a big one in terms of kind of filling my cup and feeling motivated. I'll look at my bookshelf and see, I mean, it's mostly, yeah, I mean, I think obviously I have more lived experience from the LGBTQ2SI+ framework as well. And I tend to obviously I'm a lawyer, so I read cases. So I just read a lot of case law on, you know, people's rights not being upheld. And that gets me very fired up too. So, you know, I just constantly reading the news and picking up on things that don't seem right to me. And if I have this thing that my family is always like, you need to stop. But I will read like some article on the CBC about how someone and their girlfriend weren't allowed to hang their pride flag on their condo and they got like a citation. I will like find this person on Instagram and like be like, do you need a lawyer? Like pro bono, I got you. My family's like, you need to stop. Like you have enough. Like the people are finding you. It's fine. And I'm like, I can't let people do this to other people. So yeah, good times.
Thank you.
I see Grace has kindly posted her email in the chat as she said she would. So we have time for one other question if anyone has anything, and if not, you're invited to talk to Grace directly if you wish. Okay, well, I do want to just thank Grace again very much for joining us today. That was really inspiring. I really appreciate it, and I know we all do. So thank you for taking the time to share your story and everything that you had to say with this. It was great. And I'd also like to thank members of my team who helped to organize this. Helena, I know Alicia, you're in the background. So thank you for that. And to all of you, really appreciate you joining us. I hope that you're able to join us for the upcoming sessions as well. And I hope you stay safe and well, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. So thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
I just want to toss in my thanks to all of you for attending, and obviously give a tremendous shout out and pat on the back to Vic, not only for asking me to come and talk, but for creating this space for me to share my story and for everyone to attend and listen. That's a huge part of changing the dial, and I am very happy to be working with Vic and connected to Vic, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. So thank you so much, and sending my love to Vic and to all of you. And I hope that some of you absolutely do reach out. I'm completely genuine when I say, like, please do. This is very important to me, and I make the time because of that. So I hope to connect with some of you, and have a great, I guess it's like afternoon there. So have a great afternoon, and take care, everyone.